This video is brought to you by Raycon. I just saw the new Exorcist movie, Exorcist Believer, and I think it's the worst movie I've seen this year. Listen, I'd be lying if I said my expectations for this were any higher than 6 feet below the floor, but that said, I was kinda excited to see how bad it'd be. Movies that end up being just a bore are one thing, but a movie that seems to be universally hated could sometimes turn out to be a silly enough time. This unfortunately was not that. Guys, Exorcist Believer is one of the blandest movies I've seen in the last year, a movie that barely has a pulse and that I have plenty to talk about, so let's dive in. The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green, is a sequel to the original 1973 classic, The Exorcist, and we all love The Exorcist. Now, what's funny about Believer is that I don't think anyone who enjoys The Exorcist would enjoy this, which is an interesting position to be in. I say that because most sequels / remakes these days rely on that fandom-pleasing aspect. I only sort of enjoyed the Mario movie because I love Mario. It's the leg up that these films have that make up for them being pretty whatever movies. And Exorcist Believer doesn't even seem to really make an effort to appeal to fans of the original material. Like, everything that makes The Exorcist such a terrifying and unique horror movie is non-existent in this new film. All you really get are a few references in the dialogue, cameos, a couple Easter eggs. It's less a sequel to The Exorcist made for fans of The Exorcist, and more of a movie for people who have simply heard of The Exorcist. And listen, I don't want to make it seem like this is a bad movie just because it didn't check off all the boxes for what an Exorcist sequel / remake should look like. That's a pretty shallow way of looking at the movie. No, even on its own, all Exorcist expectations aside, it's a piece of shit. The story here is that Victor Fielding, played by Leslie Odom Jr., loses his daughter Angela when she goes into the woods with her friend Catherine. When they're eventually found, they aren't exactly who they used to be, and it kicks off a bunch of strange shenanigans. That's right, we don't have just one demon girl, now we got two. What's funny is the whole idea of there being two of them this time didn't really add much to the story aside from a really weak plot point near the end of the movie. I mean, there was a lot they could have done with the fact that there's two of them, but it really just feels kind of pointless when you see the movie. There's nothing glaringly wrong with this story, by the way. It's pretty by the books for an Exorcist movie. And that said, you do kind of know exactly where it's going about 10 minutes in. Not only does every beat in this film feel completely expected, but even when the inevitable happens, it's delivered to you in the blandest, most unexciting way imaginable. Listen, if you're gonna play it this safe, at least make these moments feel somewhat shocking. Do something, anything to throw me off. Again, it doesn't feel like the movie ever has an actual pulse to it until the final 10 minutes, which we'll get to. The thing about the original Exorcist is even if you're going into it knowing you're about to see a girl getting possessed, the film is doing a lot more than just that, giving it a really unsettling and unpredictable quality to it that keeps you fascinated and on edge. That's why even if the film is a classic and comes with a load of expectations for new viewers, it still really holds up and works on people today. It's still scary. There is nothing interesting or scary about this new film. The first hour or so specifically felt tremendously unfinished. It really brought me back to my days in film school where everyone was just kind of learning how to direct and where to put the camera, doing the absolute bare minimum, kind of just checking off boxes of like what a scene should have. Don't know if this was just my theater, but the sound mix on the dialogue was super quiet, and this is very rare for me to say, but I feel like this could have really benefited from more music. First hour of this is so quiet, and not in an effective way that unsettles you. It's more like it's trying to put me to sleep. It is just some of the most unseasoned, uninteresting filmmaking of the year, and I've seen some bland stuff this year. I wouldn't say Leslie Odom Jr. gives a bad performance. He actually kind of walks away from this unscathed, but it does feel like he lacked proper directing. His character really just stays on one note the entire movie, being generally upset and sad. Even when things start to properly ramp up and his daughter starts going cuckoo nutso bananas, he barely looks like he cares. He feels underutilized, which is something you can say about pretty much all of the actors here. The girls are alright, their performances aren't ever scary, but they get the job done. In my opinion, the real dud here is, let me get this name right, Norbert Leo Butz. He really is overacting every single scene he's in, kicking trash cans, terrible fake crying. He pulls out all the hits. If you're at all on board with the film, it's his performance that makes you go, okay, this kind of sucks. Is it at least scary? Absolutely not. On top of everything else, I do think this has all of my least favorite traits of modern horror mixed into one film. It has these loud and cheap jump scares that I thought we've moved on from as a society. You know, the kind of jump scares scares that just make you jump and flinch but don't actually scare you at all. You immediately brush them off your shoulder. Any creepiness the possessed girls give off is immediately taken away once the unbearably cringy demon voice comes out. It doesn't even come close to pulling off what Mercedes McCambridge was doing. I will say though, for as corny and as dull as they eventually got, I did think the makeup on the possessed girls was pretty good. It was properly disgusting, even if it could have been grosser. That is probably the highlight of the film for me. Now that I think about it, I have to give them credit for that. Where this film really becomes the dumpster fire that it is though, is in the end. It's like a fucking Marvel Avengers movie where everybody comes together and does their priest shit like it's a superpower. It's getting to a point with modern blockbusters where I'm like, what can't be ruined by this modern style of filmmaking? Why does the cameo in the second to last shot of the film feel like a new superhero showing up? What is going on here? The entire final act of this film is like watching someone try to fit a square cube into a circular hole. The Exorcist is just simply not the kind of story that needs this kind of treatment. And on top of all of this, underneath it all is this weird, slightly conservative anti-abortion messaging, a message that feels wildly out of touch with what the original Exorcist was getting at from my understanding. But you know what? That gets into hairy territory with not only spoilers, but also who's to say maybe I'm overreading this. If you want to get into it properly, I'm sure there's a disaster going on in the comments right now. Point is, even without that, the film is still undeniably the most boring dumpster fire out there. I cannot believe they spent $400 million securing the rights to The Exorcist just to make something so detached from what made the original material so special. I wonder if they're even gonna finish this trilogy. I have so many questions, and I'm glad this one's over. I did think long and hard if this was my least favorite movie I've seen in the last few years, and I gotta say, Thor Love and Thunder still takes the cake. I know you didn't come here expecting Thor Love and Thunder slander, but man, that movie sucks. At least this isn't that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Go watch Exorcist Believer and form your own opinion, and before you head out, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Raycon. It's that time of the year again. Raycon's anniversary sale is going down, and this year they're turning 6. See, Raycon has really made a name for themselves in the premium audio space in just the last few years. I mean, just this past year, they introduced Raycon Home and Raycon PowerTech, so needless to say, there's a lot to celebrate. You guys know I've been a fan of Raycon. Thanks to their comfortable fit, I love using mine when I'm going for a run. They're designed to seamlessly fit the curvature of the human ear, so no matter what I'm doing, they're not going anywhere. Their noise isolation feature allows me to lock in when I need to focus on some important studies. Not to mention the price of these things. They offer the same premium quality of other leading wireless earbuds, but at half the price. To thank everyone who's shown support over the past 6 years, Raycon is offering 20% off everything on their site with select items at 40% off. Celebrate Raycon turning 6 with their biggest sale of the year going on now. Hurry now to buyraycon.com/Karsten and use code BIRTHDAY to get 20 to 40% off site-wide.